when Bram Stoker created his immortal vampire Count Dracula in 1897. He drew inspiration from a real historical figure far more terrifying than any fictional monster. Vlad III of Wallachia, known as Vlad the Impaler or Vlad Dracula, was a 15th century prince whose cruelty was so extreme that his name became synonymous with horror itself. This is not a tale of supernatural creatures, but the true story of a man whose brutality transcended mortality to become legend. Vlad was born in 1431 in Syakora, Transylvania, into a world of violence and betrayal. His father, Vlad II, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order dedicated to defending Christian Europe against the Ottoman Empire. From this membership, his father earned the name Dracul, meaning both dragon and devil in Romanian. Young Vlad became Dracula, son of the dragon, or son of the devil. Wallachia, the small principality his family ruled, was caught between two great powers, the Kingdom of Hungary and the mighty Ottoman Empire. This geopolitical nightmare would shape every brutal decision Vlad would later make. In 1442, when Vlad was just 11 years old, his father made a desperate bargain to keep his throne. He sent young Vlad and his brother Radu as hostages to the Ottoman Sultan. The years Vlad spent imprisoned in the Ottoman Empire, from 1442 to 1448, forged the monster he would become, while his younger brother Radu adapted and became a favorite at court. Vlad remained defiant and was brutally punished for it. He was frequently whipped, tortured, and witnesses suggest he may have suffered even worse abuses. It was here that Vlad first witnessed the Ottoman practice of impalement, a slow, agonizing method of execution where victims were displayed on stakes for days as they died. The Ottomans used this to terrorize their enemies. The young prince watched, learned, and remembered, while Vlad suffered in captivity. Tragedy struck at home. In 1447, his father was assassinated by rival nobles, and his older brother Mircea was captured, tortured, and buried alive. When news reached Vlad, the seeds of vengeance took root in his traumatized mind. In 1448, backed by Ottoman forces, 17-year-old Vlad claimed the Wallachian throne for the first time. This reign lasted only 2 months before he was overthrown. For the next 8 years, he plotted his return, even forming an alliance with John Hunyadi, the very man who had orchestrated his father's murder. This showed Vlad's calculating nature. He could set aside vengeance when necessary, but he never forgot. In 1456, Vlad seized his opportunity. He defeated his rival in combat and reclaimed his throne, beginning the reign that would make him infamous throughout history. Once secure in power, Vlad moved swiftly and brutally. His first target was the Boyar class, the wealthy nobles who had killed his father and brother. On Easter Sunday 1459, he invited all the leading Boyar families to a feast at his palace. After they had eaten and drunk their fill, his guards arrested them all. The older Boyars were immediately impaled on stakes around the palace. The younger, stronger ones were forced to march 50 miles to a ruined fortress, where they rebuilt it stone by stone until many died of exhaustion. Those who survived lost everything: their titles, wealth, and dignity. This single act eliminated his rivals, filled his treasury, and sent a clear message: Vlad would show no mercy to anyone who opposed him. But it was his use of impalement that truly earned his terrible name. Vlad didn't simply execute criminals and enemies. He turned execution into psychological warfare. Stakes were carefully positioned to avoid vital organs, ensuring victims suffered for hours or even days before death. These dying victims were displayed prominently along roads, in town squares, around his palace, creating forests of the dead and dying. Contemporary accounts describe nightmarish scenes when Ottoman envoys refused to remove their turbans in his presence. Claiming it violated their customs, Vlad had the turbans nailed to their heads. Saying he wished to strengthen their customs, the envoys were then impaled. To demonstrate his absolute control, Vlad placed a golden cup in the central square of his capital, freely available for anyone to drink from. Despite its value, no one dared steal it throughout his entire reign. The fear he instilled was so complete that even the possibility of his wrath ensured perfect order. In 1462, Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople himself, sent forces to subdue Vlad once and for all. What happened next became the stuff of nightmares. Vlad captured thousands of Ottoman soldiers and impaled them all along the road to his capital. When the Sultan arrived with his main army, he was greeted by a sight that would echo through history. Approximately 20,000 impaled corpses stretched for miles in what became known as the Forest of the Impaled. Bodies in various stages of decay hung on stakes, creating a corridor of death and horror. The Sultan, a man known for his own military ruthlessness, was so disturbed by this display that he withdrew his forces. Vlad had achieved the impossible. He had made the mighty Ottoman Empire retreat. Through sheer psychological terror, a small principality had defeated a superpower, not through military might, but through calculated horror. Was Vlad insane, or was his cruelty a brilliant strategy? The answer is disturbingly complex. From a strategic perspective, Vlad's actions made brutal sense. Wallachia couldn't defeat the Ottoman Empire through conventional warfare, but by making conquest psychologically unbearable. By ensuring that every mile would be paid for in nightmares, Vlad created a deterrent that worked. The Ottomans did withdraw, and Wallachia maintained autonomy during his reign. His reign also achieved domestic stability. Through terror, crime virtually disappeared. Rebellion was unthinkable. The corrupt noble class was destroyed. In the harsh medieval world, these could be considered successes. However, the enthusiasm with which Vlad pursued torture, the creative variations he employed, and the apparent pleasure he took in witnessing suffering suggest something beyond political calculation. Modern psychologists analyzing historical accounts suggest Vlad suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder from his childhood captivity. Combined with antisocial personality disorder, Vlad seemed to genuinely believe he was creating a just, orderly society. In his twisted worldview, extreme measures were justified by extreme circumstances. The self-righteous conviction, combined with childhood trauma and the brutal norms of his era, created a perfect storm of cruelty. The very qualities that made Vlad effective in the short term led to his downfall. His uncompromising nature, his reliance on terror over diplomacy, and his willingness to make enemies on all sides eventually isolated him. In 1462, the Sultan appointed Vlad's brother Radu as a rival claimant to the throne. Radu was diplomatic, accommodating, and willing to compromise, everything Vlad was not. Exhausted by Vlad's reign of terror, many Wallachian nobles defected to Radu's side. Vlad fought a desperate guerrilla campaign, but was eventually forced to flee to Hungary seeking aid. Instead of help, he was arrested by the Hungarian king on dubious treason charges. For the next 12 years, Vlad languished in various prisons and under house arrest. During this time, he converted to Catholicism and married a Hungarian noblewoman, with whom he had 2 sons. In 1476, political circumstances changed. Wallachia had descended into chaos, and the Hungarian king decided a strong, if brutal, ally was better than continued instability. Vlad was released and reclaimed his throne with Hungarian support in November 1476. This final reign lasted only weeks. In December 1476 or January 1477, Vlad died violently, though the exact circumstances remain disputed. Some sources claim he was assassinated by Boyars seeking revenge. Others say Ottoman soldiers killed him in battle. More dramatic accounts suggest he was killed by his own men who mistook him for an enemy. In the chaos of combat, the man who had lived by violence died by violence. His body was supposedly buried at Snagov Monastery on an island near Bucharest. But when archaeologists excavated the site in the 1930s, they found no body, only animal bones. This mysterious absence has only added to the legend. After his death, Vlad's story transformed in remarkable ways. In Romania, particularly during later periods of Ottoman occupation, he became a folk hero, the prince who defended independence against impossible odds. To Romanians, his cruelty was the price of resistance. In Western Europe, the story was very different. German merchants, whom Vlad had persecuted, spread tales of his atrocities. Early printed pamphlets depicted him as a monster, with woodcut illustrations showing him dining among impaled victims. These were bestsellers, feeding European fascination with Eastern barbarism. The transformation into a vampire came gradually. Elements of Vlad's life, his Transylvanian connections, his name Dracula, the blood and death surrounding him, merged with Eastern European folklore about undead creatures. Romanian vampire legends provided the final ingredient. When Irish author Bram Stoker researched his Gothic novel in the 1890s, he discovered references to Vlad Dracula in a history book. The name and historical associations were perfect. Stoker combined elements of Vlad's biography with vampire folklore to create Count Dracula, one of literature's most enduring characters. Ironically, Stoker's aristocratic, seductive vampire bears little resemblance to the brutal medieval warlord. The fictional Dracula embodies Victorian anxieties about sexuality and foreign contamination, quite different from the historical prince's political ruthlessness. Yet the name stuck, forever linking Vlad the Impaler with the vampire myth. Today, more than 5 centuries after his death, Vlad remains a figure of intense fascination. In Romania, he's often celebrated as a national hero with statues and monuments. His ruined fortress is a tourist attraction. During the communist era, Romania's dictator promoted Vlad as a symbol of resistance. Conveniently overlooking his atrocities, Western interpretations focus more on his cruelty, seeing him as an early example of state-sponsored terrorism. Psychologists continue to debate his mental state, suggesting everything from PTSD to psychopathy. The vampire connection remains profitable. Transylvania markets its Dracula heritage heavily. Despite Vlad's limited connection to the region, Dracula's castle, actually, Bran Castle with only tenuous links to Vlad, attracts hundreds of thousands of tourists annually. Vlad the Impaler was neither the heroic freedom fighter of Romanian nationalism nor the simple monster of Western imagination. He was a complex, damaged individual shaped by brutal childhood trauma and the savage political realities of 15th century Eastern Europe. What made Vlad truly terrifying wasn't violence alone. Medieval Europe was drowning in violence. What distinguished him was the systematic, calculated nature of his cruelty, the unprecedented scale, and the psychological sophistication with which he wielded terror as a weapon. He understood that well-displayed corpses could be more effective than armies. He grasped that fear could enforce order where laws failed. He recognized that reputation could be cultivated and used strategically. The transformation of this historical figure into an immortal vampire represents our need to mythologize evil, to make it supernatural and therefore comprehensible. The truth that a human being chose to perpetrate such horrors is too disturbing. It's easier to believe in monsters than to acknowledge such monstrosity can emerge from human hearts. Vlad Tepes needed no supernatural powers to horrify. The blood on his hands was real, the screams of his victims were real, and the terror he inspired was real. He was no vampire. He was something far more frightening, entirely, horrifyingly human. His legacy reminds us that the capacity for calculated cruelty exists within our species, that trauma can breed brutality, and that the line between justice and tyranny can be far thinner than we'd like to believe. The real Dracula story is more chilling than any Gothic novel precisely because it's true, a testament to the darkness that can dwell in human souls when shaped by suffering, vengeance, and absolute power.